The biggest political gaffes and goofs and blunders. That's what we're going to be talking about today on the Tonic Accord podcast. I'm Drew. I'm joined by my friend and co-host Alex. And I'm excited for this one. You know, here on the Tonic Accord, we cover a lot of, heavy topics. We cover the, obviously the ongoing drama around the U.S. election. Sometimes we talk about, heavy topics such as, genocide and civil wars. But sometimes we like to give it a little more lighthearted, and this is one of those episodes for sure. I wanted to take, now that we're kind of past the most of the craziness of the 2020 election, I wanted to take a look at some of the funny blunders and goofs and gaffes from politics past, and maybe take a look at some of those that might have even tanked whole campaigns. So we'll see where we end up with this. Man, and what are some of your favorites?
What's up, Drew? Doing pretty well. We're getting some snow, so I'm happy about that. It looks like running season's over for me, but if we get some more snow, hopefully ski season's coming. I'm in a pretty rural county here in California, but we're in the purple. Things are getting interesting, so looks like everyone's going to be at home for a while. So it's a good time to kind of think about some political blunders and all that stuff. But I actually do want to start out with a serious one because I wasn't really sure where to go direction-wise with this. I was like, there's some hilarious political blunders, and also there's some like really serious ones that could cost lives and stuff. So
sure,
I'm gonna be Debbie Downer for a second, and this one's really relevant. That's why I kind of just want to start with it. It's the stimulus fail in 2020.
Ooh.
Donald Trump and Congress. I think that, in my opinion, and the reading I've been doing, that actually probably failing to deliver a second stimulus might be one of the reasons why less people, or not less people, but why Trump didn't win this election, I would say. Because, a lot of studies have shown, and Pod Save America was even talking about this yesterday, is that a lot of Americans actually did relate getting money from these checks to Trump. And it was quite successful marketing-wise for Trump. And I actually, from what I've seen, Trump wanted to do it again, but his bullheadedness and Congress's lethargic nature kind of stopped it from happening. And now a lot of Americans might go hungry. We're going to see economic chaos. And I think that might be, historically speaking, one of the biggest blunders of the Trump administration. And I don't even really want to put it on Trump completely. Just a blunder of Congress and the United States government, really.
Yeah, exactly. How slow to move they were to help the American people is a huge blunder. I mean, the coronavirus. I mean, Trump administration's handling the coronavirus in general could be his. I mean, it's his Katrina, right? It's his biggest political blunder, and I would agree that it probably cost him the election. And yeah, the stimulus is a big part of that because you're right, like. The memes, all those memes about, where's your Trump bucks, your Trump check? Hey, what'd you do with your Trump check? Like, oh, I got a PS4 with my Trump check. Like his name was on the check, like people did associate it with him. And you're right that I don't know why he didn't just do that like 3-4 more times because I think it would have been incredibly popular.
Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. I think that's why.
Yeah, it's a good, yeah. And then, it's crazy that, almost immediately after the election ended, Mitch McConnell decided, we're going to take another look at stimulus, right? And Nancy Pelosi is like, we're going to be more bipartisan. And it's like, wow, that's strange timing from Congress on that one.
Definitely. Okay, so yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, now there's going to be, brick and mortar businesses and families that are going to get hurt. So I think that's a negative blunder, and I think historically it'll be interesting to look at that again. But yeah, what's a big gaffe or blunder you have on here?
I did more like campaign trail gaffes and stuff. I guess I was more focused on that. Not that again, there's no criteria, right? We're just kind of goofing and gaffing. But one of my favorites was Jeb Bush's "Please Clap," And again, like a lot of these gaffes are kind of just little moments that kind of sum up a vibe of the whole campaign, right? It's not necessarily like they were doing all good and then this one gaffe tanked their campaign, but I kind of found the ones that were almost like the nail in the coffin, like the one that was really like, okay, it's over, this is ridiculous. And this one was Jeb Bush's in 2016 Republican primary. He was the establishment favorite at the beginning, but then, he couldn't hold up to young guns like Marco Rubio. And then, of course, as we all know, Donald Trump eventually swept the whole thing and with his, outlandish populism. And Jeb Bush, you know, an old kind of boring milquetoast establishment Republican, really couldn't keep up. And so here's him trying to like rally his base, if he even had one, and it didn't go that well. Are we? Oh shoot! Oh yeah. Are you able to see what I'm seeing? Or
yes. I'm a little bit delayed, but I can see that right now. Yeah, you're all good.
Okay, cool.
To you.
Yeah.
I will be a commander-in-chief that will have the back of the military. I won't trash talk. I won't be a divider-in-chief or an agitator-in-chief. I won't be out there blowharding, talking a big game without backing it up. I think the next president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country, to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. That we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country.
I mean, everyone in that room looks bored.
Yeah, I was bored.
Yeah.
I mean,
you should really never have to tell your audience to clap, right? That's pretty embarrassing. And again, I mean, this was made fun of on late night and everything, and I think it just kind of summed up how, you know, low energy his campaign was, and that's a phrase that Trump coined to beat Jeb Bush, was low energy, and it was. So that was one of my, and I just remember how funny it was when everyone memed on him back in 2016. So I thought that was one of my first ones to just kind of reflect.
Yeah, and like I mean, this is probably me being Debbie Downer again, but my kind of understanding is that I think a lot of, like, that was like Jeb Bush right there sums up what was wrong with the Republican Party pre-Trump, right? Is that they really had no one to fire up people. There was no one that people really felt that powerful about, you know?
Yeah.
And this is not me saying I love Trump, but he did do something that a lot of people, especially people like Jeb Bush, couldn't do. The Skywalkers, right? So,
of course.
Yeah, I think that's a great, just a great one of many blunders for a guy who I think's a decent human being and a good guy. But yeah, no. This is an interesting one, which I think there's a lot of poetic justice to it. And it's the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1798 under President John Adams.
Oh.
I've kind of looked. I haven't done as many advertisements, but I'm more focused on, like, I guess, policy blunders. And so John Adams, you know, was a Federalist. I think the second president of the United States, and he was basically freaked out about the French Revolution and the fact that, you know, poor working people rose up and took out the elite inside of France. And so basically, the Federalist Party in the United States put out the Alien and Sedition Acts, which were basically an affront to the newly minted, you know, Constitution. And basically they kind of limited free speech and protest in a very watered down sense. And the funny part is that it was supposed to kind of consolidate power and keep the Federalist Party unchecked, and also limit, you know, speech against the government. And ironically, in 1800, Thomas Jefferson beat John Adams as a Democratic Republican, and he repealed the Alien and Sedition Acts. So, like, I don't have a whole lot really to say about it, but I just think it's funny that John Adams decided to basically, like, poop on the Constitution and put out this Alien and Sedition Acts to stop, you know, people from expressing anger and discontent. And the reaction is Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republican Party just cleaning up house.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Funny.
I mean, hey, you know, talk about a slap on the wrist, right? You make a bad policy and boom, you're out of office, and boom, a few years later it's marked down again, and yeah. Yeah, that's definitely political. You know, I certainly was not thinking that far back. That's cool that you went that far back. That's really fun. Yeah, I always wonder about, like we often forget about, like, early American politics in general, right? Like for example, we talk about how divided we are now, and we forget that at a certain point, congressmen were literally dueling each other. Like, a congressman killed another one in a duel in our government. And, you know, we're like, man, people are so nasty today. And they are. Believe me, I do believe that. We are very divided. But it's just funny to think about some of the crazy stuff that happened in our early stages that we kind of, like, gloss over, or maybe don't, like, remember, I guess. We kind of always think it was just, like, you know, boring guys with powdered wigs in a room. And I don't know, sometimes, like, one guy, there's times where they were beating each other with canes and full-on fights on the floor. Not that I would like to see that today, but at least it would be entertaining.
Question. Do you think, like, I know this is not me condoning violence, but do you think sometimes maybe some of these political issues, if you could just challenge your opponent to a duel, it could kind of just, like, I don't know, clear the waters a little bit.
It's like sometimes it does feel like that whole like my dad can beat up your dad. Like when Joe Biden's like, boy, if I could just clock Donald, like, you know, like they do. I'm sure they do. At a certain point, humans are humans. I'm sure Joe Biden wish he could just punch Donald in the face and vice versa. But I don't know. I remember I saw, I think it was like a year or two ago of, I think it was like an African nation. I don't forget, it was like Uganda or Kenya. But I remember seeing that their parliament like broke out into a brawl, and there was dudes throwing chairs, and like someone had edited on like WWE Raw, like give him the chair. Like it was awesome to see. Probably bad for policy, but it was pretty awesome to see. Okay, let's go into one of mine is Mike Dukakis in this tank. Do you know about this tank ad? Yeah, so this is a famous one. 1988 election versus George H.W. And one of the main criticisms against Mike Dukakis was that he was weak on defense. And this was, just at the end of the Cold War, people still pretty upset about the Soviet Union and worried about it. And Mike Dukakis wasn't really that strong with the military. And so in order to change his image with that, he did this PR stunt where he was in a tank, and it backfired. So let's take a quick look at this tank.
Michael Dukakis has opposed virtually every defense system we developed. He opposed new aircraft carriers. He opposed anti-satellite weapons. He opposed 4 missile systems, including the Persian.
He reminds me of the guy who drives around like LA in a Ford Raptor.
Right, exactly. Has never taken it off the tarmac. Yeah, exactly.
To Grenada and our strike on Libya. And now he wants to be our commander-in-chief. America can't afford that risk.
Yeah, so that was an ad run by the Bush campaign against Dukakis. Dukakis just did this like PR stunt for the photo op. And it looked weird, right? He won. It was like, it was like if you saw Bernie Sanders in a tank. You'd be like, what? I don't really, huh? And then his helmet was big and weird. And it was such a bad PR stunt. And, I mean, Bush defeated him handedly. And that campaign ad was part of it. That it became a phrase of, like, Dukakis in the tank. Like, it became a phrase of such a terrible PR stunt that people would reference it. If yours was a really bad PR stunt, like, come on, like, what are you pulling a Dukakis now? Like, that it became a colloquialism because of how bad this PR stunt, and it tanked his campaign, and he was never able to convince anyone that he was a strong military player.
Well, yeah, man, like, I'm really, both of us have worked for campaigns back in the day, and, I'm just surprised that someone said that was a good idea, mainly because, H.W. Bush, director of the CIA, vice president, veteran. I think he was shot down in, would he have been, I'm trying to think of which war?
Korea?
Korea, probably. Yeah, that's what I was, it doesn't, anyways, but like he's like literally kind of the intelligence veteran guy. Yeah. So like, what's the point of trying to like run against that, especially when, Dukakis, I think your thing with Bernie Sanders, like your comparison for that would be accurate, because he was kind of seen as a guy who was weak on defense, foreign policy, and we have to remember that this was during the kind of fall of the USSR, right? This is kind of leading up to the end of that, and it's some interesting stuff there. That helmet. Yeah, he just reminds me of the guy who drives around. Like, I'm up in a pretty rural area. He reminds me of, when I go down to LA or San Fran or something, and I just see someone in a Ford Raptor that's lifted, and I'm like, what are you trying to prove, man? Like, I don't know what you're going for.
And it's perfectly clean, and it's got an Instagram handle on the side, and you're like, bro, do you even use that truck? Yeah.
Exactly. I'm gonna go back because I just found a really good article that was talking about, like, just the biggest blunders in world history politically, and there's one more old one. I'm gonna contrast.
Let's do it.
This one is actually amazing, and not in a great way. It's kind of tragic, but it's amazing. It's Atahualpa, who was the emperor of the Incan Empire, gets drunk with Pizarro and loses the empire in the process. So basically what happened here is, like, I'm going to give you guys like the 1-minute summary of this, but basically Pizarro, who was a Spanish conquistador, came with about 200 men to Peru in 1532. And he invited he invited the Incan emperor Atahualpa to a banquet. And basically they drank way too much. Both sides, everyone got drunk. And then Pizarro started pressuring Atahualpa and the Incas into, converting to Catholicism. And Atahualpa said hell no, obviously. But there was a lot of drinks. And while Atahualpa was drunk with Pizarro, Pizarro's men massacred all of Atahualpa's men. And then while this was happening, Pizarro and his main guys kidnapped Atahualpa and brought him basically into a hostage situation that ended in basically Game of Thrones meets House of Cards meets Meet the Kardashians or Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It turned into this chaotic family war that feels like it's out of a Shakespeare meets Kardashians world, where then you had the family fighting to get Atahualpa's rulership or blood. I don't know. It got really chaotic, but basically Atahualpa got drunk with Pizarro. Pizarro wanted the empire, and apparently Atahualpa wanted to drink. And yeah, unfortunately, the Incan Empire basically collapsed, and it took about 200 men that were from Spain to do so. And usually you don't get drunk with your enemies when they want to decimate everything that your world stands for. But
yeah, don't get drunk on the job, I guess. My gosh.
I guess. And I'll just add that the other one that I put in, because there was an article about the biggest historical political blunders, and the second one was King Philip II entrusts the Spanish Armada to a land general. And this was like everyone knows, how the Spanish Armada got destroyed by the English. I think it was in the late 1500s. And I guess what happened is the Spanish got cocky after kind of their just conquest of the New World and all the gold they were getting. And they basically put this guy, it was Alonso Perez de Guzman. And he was inexperienced. He got seasick and he hated oceans. And apparently he was loyal to the king. So they put him in. And he didn't he didn't look into the waters at the time. So I guess they had rough seas, lost a ship. He got seasick, so he was basically useless the entire voyage. And the British were waiting for him and destroyed him. So, yeah.
Can you imagine having a Navy admiral who's seasick? Dude, you might want to get tested for that first, go on a dinghy for a day and see what happens, man.
Yeah, man, it's ridiculous. But, yeah, I mean, it makes sense why they probably lost that, so...
Dude, the Spanish must have been just so cocky. If you did conquer an empire with 200 men, you would be cocky enough to just make your homies your heads of navy or whatever.
Yeah, it's I'm afraid of heights. It'd be making me the I don't know, an Air Force pilot or something.
Yeah.
Or a rock climbing guide. I think that's a better example. Hell no.
Yeah, you're in charge of the paratroopers. You have a fear of heights, yeah. That's funny, man. Yeah, probably a pretty big blunder. I mean, think of how much history was shaped by which colonial power was in power, and the decline of the Spanish and the rise of the English shapes the world we have today, which is pretty crazy. It's that's why I love history so much, is because there's so many little things like that where it comes down to one guy making one stupid mistake that transforms the lives of billions of people after that. A little scary, but kind of cool. So I'll go back to the American campaign. I do like how we have a contrast of yours is historical blunders. Mine's more American politics. But I have a couple more for you here for this episode. One of my favorites is Rick Perry's. I know you already know what I'm going for. Is the oops where he forgets which department he wanted to shut down. So this is the 2012 Republican primary. This is an ad for Jägermeister that I can't skip. Does look good though. But this is one where, again, primaries are a weird bash of 14 to 15 similarly ideological people all trying to make sure that they look different. And so Rick Perry was I'm just going to cut out whole departments. And he had this whole plan about going to cut departments, and he forgot which ones he wanted to cut out. Let's check it out.
Get there that are gone. Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
EPA?
EPA, there you go. No, okay.
Let's talk deficit.
I like how it's with good old Mr. Paul.
Right? Good old Ron Paul.
No, sir.
You can't name the third one?
The third agency
See, the
of
problem is
government,
he dwells
I
on
would
it.
do away with the education, the commerce, and let's see. I can't. The third one, I can't. Sorry.
Not a good look.
Also, he's also next to Herman Cain, by the way. Rest in peace, that guy. Yeah, that was not a good look. So Rick Perry completely tanked after this. It was one of his biggest blunders. He also had the weird ad with him in the sweater, and he's like, "You don't have to be in the pew on a Sunday to know gays in the military is wrong." That kind of missed the mark as well. But this was definitely the one where it was like, "Yeah, man, you look like a kid who didn't do his homework. Like you looked like your kid doing the book report that didn't read the book." It was pretty bad, and he definitely did not. Sorry, hold on. I accidentally clicked on another one. He definitely did not come back after that, and that's kind of what he's remembered for. Is people don't really remember Rick Perry for much else except for this moment in 2011.
Yeah, I literally don't know anything substantively about Rick Perry except for that he's gaff prone.
Yeah.
And he said some very funny but insensitive shit.
yeah, he was it's something about Texas governors, man. They're just gaff prone. George Bush, Rick Perry, they just kind of can't say nuclear, and they make weird ads. I guess it's the Texas governor's curse.
Yeah, dude, that's oh god, I've tried to forget about Rick Perry, but what Americans should remember is that he's in or was in the current administration. I don't really know his current status, but
who knows? I actually have not kept up with him. Maybe he's doing something, but that's I mean, his political career is kind of encapsulated by that moment. At least as someone who's not in Texas, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you have any other good ones before I give him my final?
I have one more. Do you want me to go first?
Sure, do it. Go for it.
Okay. This is another one that's modern. I'm gonna skip history. Okay. Well, there's two inside of one. Is that Sarah Palin? Okay. Why John McCain chose Sarah Palin? I almost think was a predecessor to Trump. I think Sarah Palin was an earlier version of Trump. She kind of understood the temperature of a lot of lost voters, and she kind of added some dog whistling to it. She always talked about, Obama doesn't like domestic terrorists. Well, that's not true because he'd be loving I'm misquoting it, but basically she was saying Obama's a domestic terrorist, so he should love domestic terrorism. Stuff like that. Just racially twinged dog whistling. She didn't know her history, but she was the Tea Party movement, which I think we definitely talk about in other times. But the main thing I wanted to say is I think my biggest gaffe / blunder is Obama dissing Trump in 2011.
Ooh.
And hear me out, because I feel like one of the biggest blunders, and one that is still impacting us to this day, sadly, until January 21st, is that during the White House Correspondents' Dinner in 2011, Obama made fun of Trump in front of thousands of people, in front of the national media. And basically he said something like he was making fun of birtherism. And he's like, well, luckily Trump can't ever run for president. Why don't you go back to true conspiracies like the moon landing? And I'll just never forget, everyone in that room was laughing. Yep. And Trump just has this look of defeat with anger and vitriolic despise, and a lot of people think that was the time when he said, "I'm going to prove you wrong, Barack." And well, here we are, Drew.
Yeah, it's certainly, I know exactly the moment. It's certainly ingrained in my head. It's everyone references it because you're probably right. I do think that Trump at that moment was like, "Screw you! I'm gonna make you eat your lunch," and he did. He did. I mean, what can I say? He did. He became the president. Yeah, man. I mean, gosh, I bet you Barack wish he took those words back. Yeah, pretty crazy. My last one has to relate to Donald Trump as well, and it's the gaffe. Well, maybe not the gaffe, but just the political blunder of Hillary Clinton. And especially, I mean, I broke it down to two funny moments, but it encapsulates kind of the overall theme of their campaign. And the two moments I had was Hillary Clinton telling millennials to Pokemon Go to the polls. Because for those that don't know, in 2016 there's a popular app game called Pokemon Go, based on the Pokemon. And it was just huge, right? And so she wanted people to go vote for her. So she said, Pokemon Go to the polls. It was super cringy, really lame, not how you want to connect to young people at all. And then the second one to combine with that is when she called Trump supporters deplorables. And there's two things, because and a lot of people have been talking about this, especially the election we just saw. There's the two basic things that elections boil down to, and how to win them is you need to hype up your base and get your base out to vote, and then you need to persuade certain key demographics that you think you have an inroads with the other side, right? So in a quick nutshell, Joe Biden was able to rally his base, or at least the anti-Trump movement was able to rally the base. And then Joe Biden was also have enough inroads with like white suburbia to flip key states, right? That's how the election was run. Hillary Clinton did not rally her base at all. No one felt enthusiastic. And the Pokemon Go to the polls was such a stupid blunder that kind of encapsulated that. How she was just weird, robotic, cringy, forced. No one was excited about Hillary Clinton. And then on top of that, with the deplorables thing, calling her political opponents deplorable, she was unable to persuade any demographics on the right that she had inroads in, and she didn't even have inroads in, or like Republican women. She like failed to get Republican women, right? So she didn't do anything a candidate. And those two comments to me, I kind of like were the nails in the coffin. Was like, yeah, if she's gonna call the half of the country deplorable, she's not gonna persuade them, and she's gonna be these weird, half-assed attempts at getting young people to like you. I mean, come on, you're not Barack Obama, all right? You're not exactly a charmer. So those blunders I thought were pretty funny. I mean, God, Pokemon Go to the polls is like, I can hardly say that sentence without feeling a physical cringe.
Yeah, man. I mean, the Pokemon app, which I think still exists, could not even help me find Hillary supporters probably during that election because, like, give me a freaking break. Like, yeah. Like, I mean, I think you're right. I think that phrase in a nutshell just kind of sums up where Hillary was at. Like, she was trying to force you. She was trying to force you into finding her funny and connecting and relating with her, but it wasn't possible. No, it was not possible.
Not at all.
And considering that, you know, her entire family is kind of built on maybe what is wrong with the American political establishment, I just don't know. I mean, I feel like she might as well have just said, hey, Bill was president. We're rich. I have influence. Vote for me. Instead, she's like, Pokemon Go to the polls. I'm like, all right. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, but I also, that deplorable thing, I think that's still haunting the Democratic Party because I have yet to see a lot of Democrats actually condemn that statement. Is that, you know, even with this election, I think that call has been louder, you know, is that, 70 million Americans are also deplorables. I mean, I've heard people say, they're all ignorant, they're all idiots. Like, no, it's complicated. And I think I think that deplorable statement sums up what's wrong with the Democratic establishment is they're not willing to understand or listen to people that maybe are angry.
Perhaps, maybe. I mean, gosh. I mean, you'd have a lot of that. That's the big discussion, right, is the whole down ballot issue of the Democratic Party, how they're not getting people to just go down the ballot D. They just kind of got, you know, lucky with Biden and Trump, but they didn't really convince a lot of people to switch over to the party as a whole. And and that plays into that, and people like Hillary Clinton certainly encapsulate that. But I mean, you know, gaffes and goofs happen to every political candidate. They happen all the time, but there are definitely ones that are kind of key moments that can really pinpoint when a candidate, you know, starts to go down the drain. And that's kind of what I was covering. And then certainly you covered some of the political blunders as far as just strategy-wise and policy-wise that completely backfired for some historical figures. Some funny, some not so funny. I mean, especially if you're an Incan, and maybe not as funny. But certainly interesting to look at. Certainly less funny if you're Rick Perry. But hilarious if you're anyone else. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Tonic Accord. Be sure to check us out on Twitch. Right now, it's 7:30 here on PM on a Tuesday. We're live streaming on Twitch. That's generally around the time we live stream. And then we'll also post it on the Podbean, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and a host of third-party sites. Thank you so much, guys, and take care.
Don't drink with your enemies.
Yes, that's probably a good one. Don't drink with your enemies.